A few weeks ago, I was looking around for something to watch on TV in the evening, and I came across a PBS special featuring folk music from the 60s and 70s. It was a pledge drive, and I'm exactly the demographic they were trying to appeal to. Older people who watch PBS and have money to donate. I was drawn to the program because it was music from my college years. The New Christy Minstrels, Kingston Trio, Peter, Paul, and Mary. And they were singing songs like Where Have All the Flowers Gone, and If I Had a Hammer. And I remembered as I was listening to the music how optimistic I felt during that time, the late 60s and early 70s. Things seemed to be changing for the better in this country. In 1965, the Civil Rights Act passed after years of activism. The first Earth Day was in 1970 in response to growing public awareness and intolerance of environmental degradation caused by human activity. In 1975, the war in Vietnam ended again after much public protest and activism. Not only were these things changing, but it felt like we, the people, were changing them, or at least moving things forward. Marches, rallies, and boycotts were happening related to all of these issues, and they helped influence public opinion and forced politicians to take action. I was involved in some of these movements, and so I felt like I myself had the power to change things for the better in this country. There was also an active, thriving, vibrant press that reported on political actions taking place and applied their resources to investigate misdeeds. The Pentagon Papers were published by the New York Times in 1971, and the Washington Post broke the story of the Watergate break-in that drove Nixon from office in 1974. It felt like democracy in America was working as it was intended to, for the benefit of the people. I went through college and graduate school feeling like things were moving in a positive direction, and I wanted to be part of the movement. I did a lot of work for progressive candidates for office at the local and state level, and I saw more progressive people getting elected. It seemed like more people were supporting the ideals of liberal democracy, with greater equity for women, LGBTQ people, Black and brown people, and also care for the environment. And then finally, 20 years or so after I finished graduate school, it took a long time, in 2008, Barack Obama was elected. And I thought, finally, we are able to elect a Black man president, to see a Black man representing American democracy throughout the world. And I couldn't have been more optimistic about the future of America. I had plenty of evidence that things were heading in the right direction. But evidence doesn't always tell us the right story, does it? And we all know where this story is going. 2016 came, and a different reality about this country was revealed to me. It turned out that America wasn't changing so much. My fellow citizens were keeping their racism and homophobia and climate denial on the down low, but they were hanging on to them. In 2016, I discovered just how different Americans were than what I thought they were. That election day, in November 16, I felt like I went through some sort of wormhole back to 1963. I was working at the polls that year, so I wasn't following the returns on TV, because you're not supposed to be connected to the outside world when you're working the polls. I fully expected to walk out of that polling place at 9 p.m. and celebrate the fact that we had a female president. But instead, while I was driving home, the last two states that Trump needed to secure the election were called in his favor. So much for optimism. Because this wasn't just about Donald Trump. This was, again, what the people did. This is what the people of America wanted, at least a large number of them. And I felt like I lived in a country I didn't know anymore. Probably I had never known it. It brought about an abrupt end to the optimism I was feeling when I walked into the polls that day. You might ask yourself if I really had to give up on optimism. Couldn't I still have felt optimistic in the face of this devastating turn of events? But I agree with comments made in a sermon by the Reverend David Brumbaugh, in which he says, optimism is the doctrine that everything is ordered for the best, based on evidence of how the world is operating. It's hard, seeing what we're seeing going on in the world now, to embrace the philosophy that everything is ordered for the best. To be optimistic in the absence of any evidence that anything is ordered for the best can be delusional. And it can stop us from doing the things we need to do in order to change the way things are ordered. We can think of the image of the glass half full of water and the saying that the optimists see it as half full and the pessimists see it as half empty. And that works as long as there is a glass and some water. But the way I feel about the world currently is that the glass is smashed on the ground and the water has all been spilled. So it's not going to be helpful for me to sit and be cheerfully optimistic, thinking someone is going to bring me some more water. And yet I also don't want to get into a place of despair, believing the shattered glass is a sign and that I am doomed to go forever without water. Despair is appropriate when there's no possibility of change, but you don't know what possibilities there are unless you look for them. So I'm not at the point of despairing for the country yet. Somewhere in between optimism and despair is a condition UU Minister John Burens describes in the book Our Chosen Faith. He calls this condition sophisticated resignation. And he thinks UUs are particularly susceptible to it. With sophisticated resignation, we read and study about an issue intensely and then decide nothing we do will make a difference. This feels respectable to us. We're not giving up based on lack of moral fiber or the will to do the work. We did the work. We looked things up. And we have knowledge, facts, and data to support our conclusion that nothing we do will help. In the water scenario, I would ask Siri what the chances are that someone will bring me some water. And she would say there's not much chance, but there's a bubble tea shop nearby. So I would go there. I would feel bad for people who don't have access to tea and won't be getting any water, but I did the research, so I'm off the hook. In my real life, I don't want to fall into this pattern either, although it's easy to do when I'm getting so many messages that nothing is really going to change. So what's left for me? If not optimism, not despair, not sophisticated resignation, what's left? Well, what's left is hope. There's a difference between optimism and hope. These words of Barack Obama from his Iowa caucus victory explain it this way. Hope is not blind optimism. It's not ignoring the enormity of the task ahead or the roadblocks that stand in our path. It's not sitting on the sidelines or shirking from the fight. Hope is that thing inside us that insists, despite all evidence to the contrary, that something better awaits us if we have the courage to reach for it, and to work for it, and to fight for it. Excuse me. Need some water. Hope is the belief that destiny will not be written for us, but by us. by the men and women who are not content to settle for the world as it is, but have the courage to remake the world as it should be. With hope, we see that the world is not ordered for the best, and we work to make it so. We hold ourselves open to new possibilities, and we are ready to act when the time is right. The ready-to-act piece is an important feature of hope. Hope is an action word, unlike optimism. It's something we do. We think of the adage that goes something like, hope for rescue, but swim towards shore. Similar sayings are common in many cultural and religious traditions, and it reminds us that we have to do our part, even when we're hoping something will come and help us. Right now, the world certainly needs remaking. There's wars and gun violence of all kinds. Rights we thought we had won long ago are being rolled back. Voting rights, women's reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, labor rights. Environmental degradation continues. Fires and storms rage, made worse by climate change. And we have a candidate for president who quotes Hitler and who is leading in the polls. I want to change the world. I want to change these things and fix the broken world, but I can't do it by myself. It would be easy to slide into that sophisticated resignation Burns talks about and just walk my dog and watch Netflix and let myself off the hook. But then I hear the voice of Barack Obama telling me I can't sit on the sidelines or shirk from the fight. I have to do the things I can do. I have to swim towards shore. I can't by myself decide who gets elected to any office, but I can do things to try to influence the outcome. I can write letters and postcards to registered voters, go to rallies, fundraisers, contribute to campaigns. And I've learned over the last few years about the importance of down-ballot races like school boards and county boards. We see how much influence these groups have on local policies, and a few votes can make a big difference in the outcome of those races. So I devote some of my time and money to remaking the world here in Placer County. But hope is also a spiritual concept, and I need to be sure that I'm developing and sustaining my spiritual self so that I can stay hopeful in the face of failure and loss that is sure to come at times. There are a lot of spiritual practices that help with this, but the main source of spiritual sustenance for me is this church and all of you. A lot of the reason people join churches in general is to give them hope. For many people, what they're hoping for will take place in the afterlife. They join churches that offer them salvation after they die. Unitarian Universalist churches don't offer us that. Instead, they offer us a community of seekers and the spiritual resources so we can create paradise on this earth and find salvation in this life. Salvation for me takes the form of building up my own spiritual strength and developing spiritual practices to help me stay present and live with intention even when conditions in the world are difficult. I also gain spiritual energy from working with a community of people who want to change the world in the same ways I do. Other things I find here that help me stay spiritually charged and revitalized are joy, gratitude, generosity, and people who care about each other. And all of these things are just as important as writing letters and attending rallies in terms of keeping me spiritually centered. I need this congregation to keep me centered and grounded as political and cultural winds shift around me. I have to stay strong to do the difficult work of resisting the erosion of rights and the attacks on democracy that I'm witnessing now. And as I said, I can't do it alone, but we can do it together. And just as political campaigns need people to do practical work in order for them to have the desired outcome, I also need to do the practical work to keep this church thriving so that it's there for me when I need the spiritual uplift that it offers. So I attend worship regularly, and I lead worship at times to give Reverend Alex a week off here and there. I offer my services as needed for things like making coffee or serving on the board. I contribute as much as I can financially so that we can support our minister and our staff. And I want to do all that because I hope this church survives. And when I hope for something, I have to work to make it so. I want this church I value this church and what it represents in a conservative place like Placer County. I want us to continue to be a safe place for LGBTQ families, a voice for the unhoused, a model of environmental awareness and action. I want to feed my body with cake and my soul with music and connect with things that are larger than the daily struggles of the world, and that will help me see the way forward. I saw a picture on Facebook recently that showed two people with word bubbles. One person was saying, "The world is such a mess right now, I don't know what to do. What do you think is going to happen in the future?" The other person says, "I think there will be a lot of flowers." The first person says, "Flowers? Why do you think that?" And the second person says, "Because I'm planting seeds." May we all go out and start planting the seeds of the world we want to create, here at SFUU, in Placer County, and in the wider world. The seeds may bear fruit that we will never taste, but they may remake the world for generations to come if we have the audacity to hope.